One of the most interesting positions of all the training camp battles is going to be interior offensive line. What's going to happen with Spencer Burford and John Feliciano? Could there be a battle at center as well with Jake Brendel dealing with knee tendonitis? There's just so many questions about this 49ers offensive line heading into training camp. Not just that, but there's so many questions for 49er fans as well. Has this offensive line got good enough? Well, we're going to get into the training camp battle. Who might win? Who's in competition? All that and more in this episode of 49ers Cutback.
From the alley-oops at Kezar to the glory days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way. From off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback podcast time. Welcome to the show, everyone. Ready to talk about training camp battles because we're now firmly in July, which means training camp is just on the horizon. And the 49ers are going to have some decisions to make at several positions. And there's going to be some key training camp battles that are going to come about. Now, of course, it's always fun to take a look at those because they're going to determine how things are going to happen for these football teams. So, with the 49ers, there's a very key matchup in the interior offensive line. And last year, it seemed like it was a little bit more easier to define. You knew that Aaron Banks was going to play at the left guard, Spencer Burford was going to play right guard, and Jake Brendel was slotted to play center. Then they brought in a key veteran in John Feliciano to back them up. Well, this year, it's a little bit different. John Feliciano has returned, and now he's thought of as a starter after what he did down the stretch last season and into the playoffs. But you've also got other ingredients being added to this masterpiece of offensive line that Chris Foerster is trying to build. Now, of course, it's not a masterpiece now, but that's what he's hoping it's going to be with these key ingredients. But there's also question marks. Jake Brendel's dealing with knee tendonitis, which has made him unavailable during the offseason program. When will he be available in training camp? You've got Aaron Banks, who dealt with turf toe and a shoulder issue last year. Is he set up and ready to go? 49ers added a third-round pick in Dominic Pooney to add to the mix. They added a seventh-round or sixth-round pick in Jarrett Kingston to be able to come in and compete. So the 49ers have continually added players to this mix of the interior offensive line, and they're just looking for some stability. They're just looking for some consistency because ultimately consistency is what you seek as an offensive line. Consistency means there's less bad plays than there are good plays. You don't want to be consistently bad. You want to be consistently good. And Coach Chris Foerster has talked about that in length during the offseason. So we know there's going to be some battles. Chris Foerster alluded to that in his press conferences. So we know that this is somewhat of an open competition. And why wouldn't it be an open competition? It's not like any one player has a stranglehold on the starting lineup. These players have to prove it every single day at practice in every single preseason game, and it's going to be the player that can adjust and be able to think on the fly within the rules of the 49ers offense that is going to get this job. So we're going to have a fun conversation about this. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. If you're listening on audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe, please give it a 5-star rating. If you're going to bet with Bet Online. Bet Online is your number one source for all your sports betting needs this season. From baseball, golf, soccer, right up to all the top fights in UFC, MMA, and boxing. Every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Use the promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. Bet Online, the game starts here. And one of the most important positions for any team, let alone any offense, is the offensive line. And we know a lot of attention gets paid to the offensive tackles, and it should. 49ers have the best offensive tackle in the entire league in Trent Williams. And then they have a question mark, especially amongst 49er fans at right tackle in Colton McKivitz. Inconsistency has led to people questioning whether he's the long-term answer. Now, the 49ers were willing to give him more money. So we're not going to talk about tackle in this one. We're going to put our focus on the interior offensive line because the 49ers have added a tremendous amount of players over the last few years and really tried to bolster and figure out this 49ers interior offensive line. And your offensive line on the interior has to be somewhat good because you got to be good in the run game. You got to be good run blocking, which most of these offensive linemen have proven to be. But you also got to be able to hold your ground and anchor and not allow yourself to get pushed back into your franchise quarterback in Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy doesn't want people around his legs when he's trying to throw the football. Now, we've seen him still be able to have more success doing that than most, but ultimately you want to create a pocket and you want to allow him the freedom to step up in the pocket and deliver the football. That's an area the 49ers have struggled with. Jake Brendel, not the best at anchoring. Spencer Burford hasn't been that great either. Banks has showed the ability to do so when he's not hurt. The problem is when Banks gets hurt, especially dealing with turf toe or even with the shoulder injury, not only does his reach go down, but also his footwork starts to struggle. When that happens, lateral quickness becomes a problem for him. That has been something I've noticed since his rookie season. When he would go against Maurice Hurst at practice, Hurst would absolutely dominate because of his lateral quickness. That was something that Banks got better at. Banks by year 2 was way more nimble. His body definitely transformed. And we've seen him take a step forward. And I don't know if Banks is really in the competition of who's going to play over him. I don't think there's a direct competitor to start over him. He's a part of a situation that predates him. As Laken Tomlinson was the left guard for a long time. Then they brought in Aaron Banks. But Banks wasn't slotted to get those reps behind Laken Tomlinson. He was slided on the right side to go against Daniel Brunskill, see if they could have an improvement there. And of course, we know Brunskill won that job. Brunskill played the entire season as starting right guard, and Banks was relegated to the bench in a redshirt year learning. Now, once Laken Tomlinson left in free agency, Banks stepped into left guard. Well, here you've got a situation where the 49ers drafted Dominic Pooney, and the natural thought process was he's been playing left tackle, he's moving to the inside, he's going to play left guard behind Aaron Banks, because when you look at the other side, John Feliciano and Spencer Burford. So let's even this thing up. But not the case. Coach Chris Forster said that Dominic Pooney is going to be competing at right guard. When he's taking reps in OTAs, it was at right guard. So the San Francisco 49ers are doing something similar with Pooney that they did with Banks. Even though he may be the inevitable starter at left guard, he's taking reps at right guard and in competition with Spencer Burford. So let's take a look at these positions and just talk about where we could get some battles in training camp. And I think the first one would have to be right guard, because I think it's the most convoluted of the 3 interior offensive line positions. Now, Jake Brendel's been out, so John Feliciano has been taking all the reps at center during OTAs and minicamp. When Brendel comes back, the thought would be Brendel would step in as center number 1, but John Feliciano still probably going to get some reps. Will it be second team reps with him taking first team reps at guard? I think that's a bigger thing to watch when we get to camp. But Spencer Burford has been taking the reps during the offseason at right guard. And it's not like Spencer Burford doesn't have the ability to do so. He's a guy that has started a lot of football games in this league, 27 games that he started over his 2-year career. So experience for Spencer Burford well beyond the guys he's going to be in competition with, not named John Feliciano. Now, with the way Feliciano played down the stretch in the playoffs and even before he got hurt in the Super Bowl, you have to believe that John Feliciano is a leader in the clubhouse when it comes to playing right guard. In fact, if you would have asked me before we got the interview from Coach Chris Forster, my thought process would have been, wow, yeah, we've got our starting offensive line already figured out. We're going to have Trent Williams at left tackle, Aaron Banks at left guard, Jake Brendel at center, John Feliciano at right guard, and Colton McKivitz at right tackle. And why do I say that? Well, it just seemed the most obvious of the lineups that you would go with, because of the fact that That's what your starting offensive line looked like heading into the Super Bowl. That's what you potentially got your best play out of down the stretch. And you've got veterans at every single position, guys who have been in the league, for at least 5+ seasons. These guys are, in Banks' case, this will be his fourth season, but guys with experience who have seen a lot in the league. And the 49ers definitely like that. They like the continuity. They like having guys that can play the position. But you're looking at a couple of guys in Trent Williams and John Feliciano who graded out really good when it came to PFF, and then a few guys that didn't. Now, the only question mark that could change up the right guard competition between Feliciano and Spencer Burford, I think those are the two guys who would be in direct competition. And I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that John Feliciano would beat out Spencer Burford. And I know that might be hard to hear, but when you hear Chris Verster talk about the fact that Spencer Burford's the most talented interior offensive lineman the 49ers have, it makes you think, wow, if Spencer Burford comes in and all of a sudden takes care of his inconsistencies, because that's a weakness of his, is if he takes care of his inconsistencies and becomes consistent, you have to think he's got a real opportunity to battle John Feliciano. And part of the reason I believe that is there were 14 games last year where Spencer Burford started at right guard over John Feliciano, which means at some point they felt he was a better player than Feliciano. Now, I believe Feliciano definitely asserted himself, and once he got the opportunity because of injury, he took that right guard job and never looked back. Spencer Burford never had a chance. Well, now you're getting an opportunity to do so. And the door might be open by the fact that Feliciano might be taking reps at center. That might allow Spencer Burford to step in. What did Spencer Burford do in his rookie season? Daniel Brunskill, out with injury, steps in, takes over the right guard job, and never looked back. Now, they did do a rotation with Daniel Brunskill, and it worked out pretty well. Could the 49ers elect to go with the rotation? Maybe they would. I think the 49ers ultimately want the best offensive lineman out there. And so, what combination will that be? Well, when you're talking interior offensive lineman, right now, John Feliciano would be the best guard. But could he also be the best center? I think that's where the conversation gets interesting. It might not be that Burford has to beat out John Feliciano for right guard, but what if John Feliciano beats out Jake Brendel for center? We've heard Chris Verster talk about the fact that John Feliciano's best position is center. Jake Brendel's dealing with knee tendonitis. Jake Brendel was dealing with not being able to hold blocks during the season last year. That was one of his real issues when it came to his blocking technique. He was good about getting to the second level. In fact, he's tremendous getting to linebackers and being able to block them, getting in the right position to get his body between the ball carrier and the player. The problem is he can't hold that block consistently. And if you can't hold that block, all of a sudden runs that would have went for 7-8 yards, McCaffrey having the opportunity to get on the third level and make a safety or cornerback miss and potentially getting a touchdown, to getting tackled for 4 or 5 yards. And ultimately, that's not terrible, but could it be better? Could John Feliciano, now that he's in year 2, and I think that's probably a reason why he wasn't a serious competition last year, we've seen centers with the amount of rules and responsibilities they have to play within the 49ers organization for a while in this offense. Just take a look at Alex Mack. Alex Mack came in from Atlanta Falcons. He had played in Kyle's system before, yet talked about how it was still a transition all the way through the year, that still some of the calls were escaping him, that it was still difficult. And Alex Mack is one of the smartest interior offensive linemen that I've ever seen. So it might have taken Feliciano just a year to get a grasp of this Kyle Shanahan offense, when he's supposed to go where with protections, what the rules are. So now it could be an actual serious competition for center. And I don't know how many people are ready to have that conversation, but there's a potential that John Feliciano could beat out Jake Brendel. And then the question is John Feliciano, Spencer Burford a better combination than Jake Brendel, John Feliciano? It all depends on how much you like Spencer Burford. Now, if Burford's playing up to the level he's capable of, it's definitely Feliciano and Spencer Burford. But where does that leave Dominic Pooney? Well, Dominic Pooney's got an opportunity here to come in and compete as well. Now, when Chris Verster was talking about Dominic Pooney, he talked about Burford being more talented than Pooney, but he talked about how talented Pooney is. And just watching his college tape, watching his Senior Bowl, he's really good. We talked about the anchoring issue earlier. Well, one thing John Feliciano does is anchor well. One thing Aaron Banks does is anchor well. One thing Dominic Pooney does is anchor well. So if you wanted to have an interior offensive line that didn't give up ground in the passing game when it came to pass protection, Dominic Pooney could figure very nicely into that. He doesn't give up ground. Jake Brendel does. So Spencer Burford struggles with it. So you've got an opportunity here where you could definitely change that offensive line up. But we just talked about the fact that rookies don't normally start for the 49ers in offensive line. Veterans who come in, who are experiencing the offense for the first time, it's a struggle to play center. So how quickly is Dominic Pooney going to pick up this 49ers offense? I think that's a big question. Can he pick it up fast enough to be legitimately competing with Spencer Burford and competing with John Feliciano? I think it's going to be tough for him. The fact that Coach Chris Foerster, though, chose to put him at right guard instead of left guard, and I think he's got a lot of competition going on at left guard, which we'll talk about in a moment, but I think he wants Spencer Burford and Dominic Pooney to push each other. I think he wants everyone on that side to push each other, whether it's Feliciano, Burford, Pooney, all of them pushing each other for the best possible play, because competition breeds really good championship football playing. So that's what they want. They've got to get better, and they need all three guys to get better. So bringing a guy in makes a lot of sense. That competition for right guard right now is 3 heavy. Now, Feliciano moving over and competing with Jake Brendel would change some things. Now, you could look behind them, and you've got a guy like Ben Barch who started taking snaps in practice. Then we know how comfortable they feel about him and his 5-position versatility. Nick Zakel behind Ben Barch. And then you bring in some more young guys, a guy like, Nugent that you're going to get to potentially come in as an undrafted free agent and compete. Where do they sit in center? Well, I think it comes down to 2 guys starting at center. It's either going to be Jake Brendel or John Feliciano. And that's going to create a ripple effect with the other positions. Feliciano could be a upgrade at center and change the way the 49ers go about offense, with Burford and Pooney potentially battling it out for right guard. Then when you look at left guard, and you've got Aaron Banks, and Aaron Banks was very, very comfortable. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Last year, John Feliciano was the interior offensive line swing player. He could play right guard, he could play center, he could play left guard. Played all of them at some point, minus center. I think he did in preseason, but in the regular season, he played right guard and left guard. And he did a fantastic job. What have we just talked about? When you're talking about Spencer Burford, he's only played right guard in the NFL. When you're talking about Dominic Pooney, they're not practicing him to play left guard. They're practicing him to play right guard. So if you've got your ultimate utility guy in John Feliciano starting on the offensive line, it means you need another utility guy. Well, which one of those guys, Dominic Pooney or Burford, can do it? Well, we don't know. Right now, it just looks like they're going to play right guard. The likelihood is the left guard could produce a utility guy, a guy that if Banks is hurt could step in and play that left guard spot. Or maybe step in and play center if Jake Brendel gets hurt, because Feliciano is going to play potentially starting right guard. So what does that mean? Who are you going to have? Well, we talked a little bit about Ben Barch, and Ben Barch is definitely someone that Coach Chris Foerster really, really likes. The fact that he was tipped off about how good Barch dealing with injuries in Jacksonville, was sitting on their practice squad. And the 49ers went and cherry-picked him and brought him in to the organization, put him on the 53-man roster, and let him continue to work through the entire season, getting comfortable with this offense. Never really got to see him in too much gameplay. It was never something that we got to see. We didn't see him in training camp last year because he joined the team late. So we don't actually know how good Ben Barch is, but what we do know is Chris Foerster likes him a lot. He talks about him. He talks about his ability to play other positions, to play potentially tackle in a pinch. That 5-position versatility and making yourself a utility player could be what he has to do to make this team, because the truth is no one is challenging and starting over Aaron Banks this season. John Feliciano, his position could be up in the air, and I know a lot of people believe he's the second best offensive lineman on the team, and that could be the case, but he's never been just the chosen one yet. He could be. I mean, he played the most consistent beyond Trent Williams last year. That's not a lie. But the 49ers definitely are going to let this thing play out. I just don't think Banks has any real competition behind him. Because you look at Ben Barch and then you look at Nick Zakelj. And when Zakelj came out, I mean, everyone was excited about him. I was definitely excited about a player that was that intelligent who had 5 position versatility. He could play all 5 positions. It reminded me of Daniel Brunskill. I think Ben Barch and Nick Zakelj are Daniel Brunskill mold. Now, we definitely haven't seen the play of Daniel Brunskill in either one of those guys. And with Barch, we just haven't seen it a lot. Now, he has started games in the NFL for other football teams, so it's not like he has is lacking in experience. Nick Zakelj is lacking in experience. Even though he's been with the team for 2 years, he hasn't really played in football games. He played in preseason, and last year it didn't look very good for Nick Zakelj. He didn't really progress as playing center, which I think they really wanted. The fact that he was rooming with the quarterback, Brock Purdy, made you think, hey, this connection center quarterback would really work out. But we haven't really seen that be the case. And now you've got a situation where Nick Zakelj is battling just to make this roster, not a starting position. But I think that's a training camp battle to watch. Is Ben Barch versus Nick Zakelj. Because these guys are carbon copies as far as what their position and versatility is on this offensive line. Both are expected to play all 3 interior offensive line positions and be a utility player, but also in a pinch be able to play tackle, the same way Spencer Burford had to go out and play tackle last season. So the 49ers are expecting somebody to step up. They're expecting somebody to make a play on the interior offensive line. And Barch and Zakelj have that versatility to do so. But the 49ers also brought in Jarrett Kingston. And what position is Jarrett Kingston going to play? I've heard rumors that maybe they like him at center. I've heard he's going to get reps at right guard or left guard. He played tackle in college. Well, the 49ers have a decision to make with Kingston. Is he going to have a legitimate shot to get consistent reps and be able to make this football team? I think it's going to be difficult. Now, the one area you got to give Kingston an advantage over most of the 49ers is he's really good at pass blocking. Pass protection, he did a lot at Washington State, and he really had to work on his run blocking when he got to USC. They just don't run as much at Washington State. So he's having to develop that part of the game. In fact, one of the things Chris Foerster brought up, not just about Jarrett Kingston, but Dominic Puni, was they need to get better at run blocking. Well, what do the 49ers do more than any football team in the NFL? Run the football. 49% of the snaps last season, or 48.8% of the snaps last season, were running the football. 49ers are one of the most balanced offenses in the league. Their offense is predicated on good run blocking that plays into play action and creates advantageous third down situations to throw the ball, which means third and short. It means getting the ball in Christian McCaffrey's hands and being able to block well. But one thing you can say about the 49ers offensive line last season was they blocked very well for Christian McCaffrey. They had big enough holes to be able to create open opportunities to run the football. It wasn't like McCaffrey was doing it all on his own, a la a Barry Sanders type. He had holes to go through. Of course, he had to use his tremendous vision and his great skills to be able to do the things he does that make normal holes look dynamic and normal plays be explosives. But the 49ers offensive line definitely helped. It was a nice pairing between them and McCaffrey. Where they struggled was the 37% of the time that Brock Purdy should have been sacked when he got away. That could have increased the 49ers sack numbers immensely, but Brock Purdy's elusiveness really helped this offensive line. I think part of the problem was a lot of the interior offensive linemen struggled as far as anchoring and lateral quickness. Shouldn't be a problem when you're talking about lateral quickness with a guy like Spencer Burford, who has tremendous athleticism. He's one of the taller guys with some of the longest arms. Should be able to do really, really good. So how does this thing play out with this 49ers interior offensive line battle? Well, I think there's 2 main battles to watch as far as starting lineup. I wonder if Chris Foerster is actually going to let John Feliciano compete with Jake Brendel. If he does, that's going to be one to watch. But while that battle's going on, Could that in case make another battle for Spencer Burford and Dominic Pooney for the right guard spot? If Feliciano is just playing right guard and Jake Brendel's going to take all those snaps at center, and they're going to go with Nugent and they're going to go with Barch and those guys getting the second and third team reps, then Burford Pooney competition really is not as significant because both of them are expected to make the team. But if Feliciano is there at center, maybe it's just because Brendel's not healthy, you might get real comfortable with the Feliciano, Burford, Banks, Colt McKivitz, and Trent Williams offensive line. And if you do get comfortable with that, there might not be a spot for Jake Brendel. Now, Brendel has utility versatility, so he could play center, he could play both guard spots, which means he would be a very valuable backup for the 49ers if that's the case. But that's something I'm interested to see. Feliciano versus Brendel play out over training camp. Can Brendel be back? I'm sure Brendel's doing everything he possibly can to make sure his knee tendonitis is 100% under control because that's a risk. When you're not on the field, you run the risk of getting replaced by a capable body. Well, the best ability is availability. And he knows he's got to be available because if he's not, this might make the 49ers think about what they could do ahead. And when it comes to Dominic Pooney, go out there and do what you've been doing. Be very good in pass rush. Go take care of Malik Collins and Javon Hargrave, which is going to be absolutely must-see television and must-see work at training camp. And I know it's not actually going to be on TV, but just watching that in person, him be able to go against these guys, and let's see how quickly it translates to the NFL game because he just doesn't give up sacks. And if he's able to anchor, he's going to get the attention of the 49ers brass early on. And there's going to be a real opportunity for him. When it comes to Barch and Zakel, make yourself the most versatile you could be. And I think that's going to be a competition for a roster spot. The loser will not make this team. The winner may not make this team. It's going to be difficult to make the 49ers offensive line this year. They brought in more guys to play on the outside. We know they want to keep Jalen Moore to play behind Trent Williams just in case Trent misses. So we're going to talk about tackles in that competition potentially another day. But right now, these are the competitions that I want to see. Zakel versus Barch. Loser, you're gone. Winner, you might make the team. That's how much the 49ers have added depth to the offensive line. John Feliciano versus Jake Brendel. That's going to be one to watch. If Feliciano wins, boy, does it shine a light on that right guard spot between Spencer Burford and Dominic Pooney. I think Burford would be a little bit ahead of Pooney right now, but I want to see how Pooney responds and how quickly he picks up this offense. But that could create some real good matchups. And then there's the wild card, Jared Kingston. Where does he end up playing? Does he end up getting those reps at left guard behind Zakel and Barch? Does he end up going and battling at right guard? Do they put him at right tackle and have him battle with Chris Hubbard? I think it's going to be very interesting to see what the 49ers do at the offensive line, especially the interior offensive line. So who do you guys think is going to win these battles? If I had to guess right now, I think it stays status quo. And you're probably going to see 49ers go with the normal offensive line, Trent Williams, Aaron Banks, Jake Brendel, John Feliciano, and at right tackle, Colt McKivitz. But if something changes and Feliciano's in a legitimate battle, I think it flips up. Feliciano wins center, and then I think Spencer Burford will be the starting right guard. So it depends on what you really want to happen, and thanks so much for the new subscription. Really, really appreciate it. Thanks for joining. And so there's just so many opportunities. Who's going to win the battle? Well, let me know in the comment section down below who you think is going to win the battle and what you think the best offensive line and starting offensive line should be. Does it include Jake Brendel and John Feliciano at center and guard? Or is it Feliciano and Spencer Burford? Really curious. But like and subscribe to the channel, just like you just saw. Subscribe. And if you haven't already, if you're listening to audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe, please give it a 5-star rating. Of course, it's available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcast. And this episode is brought to you by Bet Online. The game starts here. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Until then, stay safe. Remember, the right way is always the 49ers.